Hey guys, it's Angelo, and welcome to my Shadow Priest guide for patch 7.3.5 in World of Warcraft Legion. Compared to 7.2.5, which saw us in the Tomb of Stargaze, the Shadow Priest moves back even further to its classic style of gameplay, relying heavily on haste and crit now, as well as damage over time. In patch 7.3.5, we faced the raid of Antorus, the Burning Throne, and most, if not all of the changes to the spec have taken this into consideration. Compared to previous patches, we see a spec that can actually compete in AoE DPS while also doing very strong single target damage, and still sitting on the throne of cleave damage. The streamlining of our damage capabilities has actually been a great step moving forward, as this allows us to remain competitive in all aspects of content. In this guide, as in previous ones, we'll go over the stat priority you will want to aim for, your talents, your rotation, and the overall pros and cons we face this patch. Keep in mind that I have made a video about our rotation and our recent AoE changes specifically last week, but I will cover them here once more. If you want to see a detailed overview of those two topics specifically, I will link them in the description for you. But as always, one step at a time, so let's go ahead and have a look. Now, when reflecting back, apart from our AoE changes and the changes in the amount of stats we have, there aren't a lot of differences to our playstyle than previously. In patch 7.3, Mindseer, which is passive to Mindflay, has received a 50% buff, and our Void Eruption has received a 700% damage increase. That is a lot indeed. But also some changes to how it works, of course, to compensate. Instead of dealing damage for each dot you apply to any target, it now deals damage once per target, no matter how many dots are applied to it. To compensate for this though, our dots have been nerfed by 4%, and the legendary chest, the Heart of the Void, has been nerfed by 75% for its damage output and 25% for its healing output. Shadow Crash has also received the buff with a reduced cooldown, an increased insanity generation, and increased missile speed. Apart from that, no major changes have come to any spells or abilities we use, so the spec will still be very familiar to most of us and will remain a fair spec to introduce to any newcomer. When talking about our stat priority, virtually no changes really hit us, fortunately. Haste will remain at the top of our list, but with more emphasis on critical strike now than previously. This ties in with our new tier bonus, but more on that in just a second. Critical Strike will remain on second place, with Mastery coming next, then Intellect, which is baseline on most of your items anyway, and finally Versatility. It needs to be noted here that previously, in patch 7.2.5 and patch 7.3, Haste lost the value once above 14,000, essentially coming to a point where you can stop prioritizing Haste and go for other stats. However, with our new tier bonus and with dropping the old 4-set bonus, this is no longer the case, and Haste will pull ahead again firmly in comparison to other stats. Overall, you will want to aim for Haste as much as possible, then Critical Strike, and then Mastery. Our Critical Strike damage for Mind Flay and Mind Blast will be increased through our new 2-piece bonus, and each stack of Void Form will increase our Critical Strike chance of Void Bolt, Mind Flay, and Mind Blast with our new 4-piece bonus. Now, this gives a higher relevance to Critical Strike, of course, and should, due to Auspicious Spirits, see us remain in Void Form for a longer period of time. Luckily, our talents don't change as much, and remain very decisive in defining our playstyle. Twist of Fate still remains, or rather reigns, supreme, with Fortress of the Mind only pulling ahead in a raw, less than 3 minutes lasting fight, more so with your legendary ring, the Soul of the High Priest. Body and Soul will still be best to use for movement on demand, followed by Mania in some given situations. Mind Bomb should always be taken as your level 45 talent, as it procs your Cephas secret easily and shares an eternal cooldown with Cephas as well, making the two go hand in hand perfectly. In the level 60 row, Lingering Insanity is still dominating, especially because you want to get into consecutive Void Forms as fast as possible, which is where this talent truly shines. Reaper of Soul is still essential to effectively use Surrender to Madness, while Void Ray in itself is actually a super strong talent, especially now with the Mind Seer buffs, but due to its placement in the same row as Lingering Insanity and Reaper of Souls, it simply loses out on value and therefore can't really be recommended. Auspicious Spirits is even more dominant now than it has been previously and results in longer void forms than both Sandlane and Shadowy Insight, while also proving to give the highest DPS gain in most situations. In your level 90 row, Mindbender should be your go-to talent, followed by Misery if you have a lot of adds up that need to be dotted. Power Infusion is still a strong talent and could potentially see its comeback deeper into Antorus and patch 7.3, but for now only remains viable along with Surrender to Madness. Finally, we will want to take Legacy of the Void for most raid situations and Shadow Crash after its buff in Mythic Plus. Surrender to Madness has the possibility to become strong again whenever fights begin to take less time to complete, but if this proves to be the case, don't worry, I will be sure to make a video about it, explaining how to use it, why, and where. For now, these talents should be the ones you choose from, and your go-to talent build, highlighted in green here, will only change in specific situations as stated. Our rotation still remains one of the most engaging, fun, but yet simplest rotation in the game, while also being pretty challenging at some point. Our goal as Shadow Priest is to get into Void form as fast as possible and stay in Void form for as long as possible. With losing our tier 20 bonuses though, keep in mind that we will go back to a patch 7.1.5 style of rotation, where getting into your Void form, or rather your first Void form, will take a few seconds longer, and remaining in Void form will rely on your haste and crit values now more than previously. Once your dots are applied to targets, you will want to spam Mind Blast and Mind Flay until you can enter Void form, in which you will then want to prioritize your Void Bolt, then Mind Blast, then Shadow Word Death in your execute phase, and then Mind Flay, while either using Void Torrent early on in each Void form or as late as possible. Mindbender will be used during semi-late stages of your Void form in order to get the most gain out of it. For a full rundown of your DPS rotation in different scenarios and when to prioritize what spell, be sure to check out my video linked in the description. But for purposes of this guide, your aim should essentially be to get as many Void Bolts into any given Void form as possible, while also doing your best to remain in Void form for as long as possible. Both of these factors will contribute to most of your damage output, and the longer you can remain in Void form, the higher your damage will be. The Shadow Priest is incredibly strong when it comes to splitting its damage potential effectively onto multiple targets. Overall, the Shadow Priest this patch keeps all positive aspects of the spec, while most certainly buffing areas which previously lacked potential. We're still very strong in single target damage, but are at our best on cleave fights, while also doing solid amounts of AoE damage now. While it can be considered negative that we require multiple targets to maximize and utilize our damage capabilities, this makes our potential DPS sky high, and most other classes, if played at the same skill level, will not be able to compete with a good priest. Now, with a lot of haste and crit, a completed artifact weapon, and various quality of life changes throughout all of Legion, we shine both in raids, where we have throughout most of our priest lives, as well as finally in Mythic Plus dungeons. Granted, our AoE damage and overall effectiveness in a Mythic Plus environment will never truly be as high as that of a Demon Hunter, for example, or a Death Knight, which both not only bring high damage but also sick utility to a group, but it is most certainly competitive enough now to the point where no Shadow Priest should be restricted in access to higher level keys. To summarize, I think that we're in a very solid position now, and depending on how the patch plays itself out throughout the course of the upcoming weeks and months, we should find ourselves playing a highly competitive, fun, engaging, and rewarding class. Sure, not everything is perfect, but when reflecting back on the entirety of Legion, we are fairly well balanced now, with a solid highlight in our strong aspects, fair trade-offs in our weaker ones, which is perfectly fine. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I truly hope you've taken something away from this video, and hopefully I was able to grant you some insights and advice about the class which help you out in your time in WoW. Should you have any questions, feel free to ask away, and I will do my best to get back to you in the comments below or throughout any other means of communication, of course. If this video was helpful to you, a like would mean the world to me, and if you want to see more of my content in the future, feel free to subscribe. As always, have a good one, my friends, and I will see you all in the next one.
A lifetime in repeat.